What's his name then?
No! No!
Knull has been a topic of discussion among Marvel fans since appearing in the trailer for Venom: The Last Dance. The third Venom movie will feature the supervillain's hunt for his creations, including Venom. Today, let's get into who Knull is and what fans can expect. Knull is an ancient god of darkness. Created by writer Donny Cates and artist Ryan Stegman, Knull first appeared in the Venom comics in 2018 and soon became an enemy to several Marvel heroes. Most notably, he's the main antagonist in the 2021 event King in Black, fighting Venom, the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Sentry. His background is connected to the Celestials, primordial cosmic beings who created the current multiverse. As gods of light and creation, the Celestials disrupted Knull's realm of darkness after the end of the sixth cosmos and before the creation of the seventh. The Celestials recruited Knull to be the King in Black, a cosmic caretaker to counterpart the Beyonders. However, Knull rejected the responsibility of being the King in Black. He not only challenged the Celestials' orders, but used the living abyss to create the All-Black, or the Necrosword, which is the first symbiote ever made. He first pulled a blade out of his own shadow, then decapitated a Celestial, and used his head to finish the forging process, declaring war against the light to return the universe to the void. Although Knull is extremely powerful and the creation of the first symbiote made an impact, his goal was never easy. He was a feared figure of terror, but eventually had his Necrosword stolen by Gore the God Butcher and became stranded on a nameless planet. There, he spent some time experimenting with the living abyss. One day, Knull discovered he could control a hive mind of beings who bond with other beings, creating a web of body-snatching symbiotes he called the Hive. Forming an army of symbiote dragons, Knull managed to free himself and conquer worlds. He then created his own planet, Throne World, to serve as the center of his growing empire. However, when Thor destroyed Knull's symbiote dragons that attacked Earth, the God of Thunder cut the hive mind connections between the symbiotes and Knull, freeing them from most of the crushing influence of their creator. The symbiotes started bonding with humans and rebelled against Knull, imprisoning him at the core of his throne world, which they call Clintar, meaning cage. The introduction of Knull at this point in the Venom trilogy is ambitious. After the underwhelming adaptation of Carnage in the second movie, Sony may have considered that only turning Patrick Mulligan into the Toxin would not be enough for the third. The trailer reveals that Knull will be involved with the coming of xenophages to Earth, aliens who will hunt down the rogue symbiotes. Xenophage are a feral alien species that first appeared in Marvel Comics long before Knull existed. They were introduced as antagonists to Venom in the 1996 series Venom the Hunted, being natural predators of the symbiotes. They particularly love eating the brains of symbiote hosts. We'll have to wait and watch Venom: The Last Dance to find out what exactly is Knull's connection to the xenophage in the movie, and when he will come to Earth himself. Knull's evil personality is one of the main reasons why he is such a beloved villain. He not only took out entire planets and decapitated a Celestial, but he did so with a big smile on his face. Much of Knull's power comes from his metaphysical link to the undead corpse of the Celestial he decapitated and used to refine the Necrosword. By manipulating the living abyss, Knull created several different kinds of beings. Apart from the All-Black and the symbiote dragons, he also made other entities similar to symbiotes like Mr. E, Exelon, and the Void Knight. As the god of the symbiotes, Knull still holds some influence on them, even while locked away in a distant planet. At the center of their hive mind, which is severely weakened at the moment but ever present, Knull is the one responsible for the symbiotes' uncontrollable hunger for brains. In his full glory, Knull's influence on the hive mind is so great that he is able to remote control symbiotes. In addition to all his superhuman abilities, Knull has no need for food or water as a god. He can also shapeshift, regenerate, fly, and even manipulate the universe's time stream. But naturally, he also has weaknesses. Knull is vulnerable to various powers wielded by cosmic entities and deities, which he calls the Light. And when he's remote piloting symbiotes, his hive mind can be infiltrated and damaged from within. The inclusion of Knull in Venom: The Last Dance marks a bold step for Sony's Venom franchise. This ambitious move aligns with the trajectory of expanding the SSU, building on the lore of the symbiotes and revealing their origin in the universe. The introduction of Knull offers the perfect opportunity to breathe new life, or anti-life, into the trilogy. Knull's connection to the Celestials, his rejection of the King in Black's role, and his creation of the first symbiotes through the Necrosword weave a deep and intricate backstory that sets the stage for a cosmic battle. In fact, Knull is arguably a bigger cosmic threat than Thanos, which is leading fans to wonder whether he might cross over to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the future. His apparent hunt for Venom and others of his creations mirrors his comic storyline as he seeks to regain control of the creatures that once served him. The addition of the xenophage, alien predators targeting symbiotes and their human hosts, adds a further layer of intrigue and danger to the plot of the upcoming film. His manipulation of the living abyss and his ability to control symbiotes through a hive mind will certainly demonstrate the magnitude of his threat in Venom: The Last Dance, even if he only comes to Earth in a future Spider-Man movie. The dynamic between Knull and Venom will likely showcase a battle of wills, as Venom fights to remain free from his creator's influence, shifting the focus away from Eddie's struggles to contain Venom and their misunderstandings from the previous movies. The duo will now appreciate each other like never before as they fight Knull's control over them. According to fans, Knull's arrival should impact the broader Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. With his links to the Celestials and several other important characters, Knull has the potential to expand Sony's reach and pave the way for crossover events with the MCU proper. In Venom: The Last Dance, Knull's ruthless personality could make him a captivating villain to watch. As the movie builds toward an inevitable confrontation, Eddie will need to fight not just for Venom's freedom, but for the fate of all symbiotes. In conclusion, Knull's introduction into the Venom films definitely raises the stakes higher than they have ever been. It also brings a fresh direction to the Venom franchise, expanding on the lore behind the symbiotes. He is one of the most powerful cosmic threats in Marvel Comics, and fans are excited to watch his quest to regain his lost status, which could be further explored in other movies. Whether this really leads to future battles involving Knull or opens doors to larger MCU tie-ins with Venom and Eddie, one thing is certain: Knull is a villain like no other. After a long time being a cult favorite villain, Knull is finally going to appear on screen in Venom: The Last Dance. However, many fans might not know his origins or the true depths of his power.
My home has found us.
Knull is a great addition to Sony's parallel offshoot to the Marvel Universe, which has increasingly become entwined with the mainline narrative of the MCU. Created by writer Donny Cates and artist Ryan Stegman, Knull was introduced in Venom 3 in 2018 and was quickly revealed to be a character with an interesting and crucial background to not just Venom, but the symbiotes as a whole. If there's any character who ranks above Venom's most iconic villain, Carnage, it's Knull, who is responsible for the creation of the symbiotes. The King in Black is far more than just Venom's most powerful foe, and fans are in for a treat.
Who sent that thing?
My creator.
Knull is a cosmic being and the embodiment of darkness. He is the 6th iteration of the cosmos' chaotic nature personified in the 6th iteration of the universe. Technically, Knull is a deity who was content to float through a primordial void without much purpose other than simply existing. However, he was eventually enlisted by the Celestials to take on the role of the King in Black. This was a move that proved to be disastrous for the Celestials and sent Knull on the path to supervillainy. It was during the Celestials' development of the 7th iteration of the Cosmos, the one in which the current Marvel Universe takes place, that Knull was enlisted by the Celestials and given the title the King in Black.
Knull, the Lord of the Abyss, God of the Symbiotes.
Despite an ominous title, Knull's initial role was to oversee the beings created by the Celestials, who began to compose the universe from light, giving form to nothingness. The Void, a pleasant enough place for Knull to float endlessly, was corrupted by this light. Therefore, the act of creation in light inflamed Knull. Thus, the soon-to-be villain developed his own plans for the universe that were far more destructive. Knull began his reign of chaos when he drove his fist into a Celestial and pulled out a primordial goo. This goo would be a key component that Knull would use to manufacture All Black, the Necrosword, which notably appeared in Thor: Love and Thunder. The weapon is essentially the first symbiote, from which Knull would develop the alien race that includes Venom, Carnage, and other well-known figures. For his actions, however, Knull was cast back into darkness, where he became more incensed to lash out against the Celestials. He eventually decapitated one of the Celestials, a move that would prove essential to the growth of his power. When Knull was banished from the Celestials' light due to his rash actions, he was shunned to remain in the Void. While Knull initially just wanted the peaceful Void existence, his anger led him to no longer be satisfied with his role. It was in Knull's banishment that the character learned about All Black's true purpose as the prime source for all symbiotes. Utilizing the powers within a severed celestial head, Knull became a creator of his own living darkness. He began to expand his territory and the Void.
Your god is awake.
Eventually, Knull comes into conflict once more with the Celestials. He lands himself on a planet referred to as Clintar. During this time on Clintar Gore, the God Butcher stole All Black the Necro Sword. Despite their separation, Knull's connection with the weapon is irrefutable. It is only a matter of time before the villain and his weapon are reunited to once more wage war against the Celestials and all living beings. However, before losing the Necro Sword, Knull learned that he could use All Black to extend his will. He used this power to create symbiotes and used them to expand his dark reign. The birth of the symbiotes is essential to Marvel Comics, but this backstory has only been fleshed out recently. Originally, the gooey alien parasites were introduced as Spider-Man villains, but their backstory has always been a bit of a mystery within the comics. With the introduction of Knull, crucial aspects of the symbiote's creation were brought into focus. Through the symbiotes, Knull builds himself an army, taking over the minds of all living beings he comes across. In doing so, he continues to expand his territory even after losing the Necro Sword, increasing his army with every being his symbiotes infect.
The symbiotes didn't come here by accident.
However, Knull's powers extend beyond control of the symbiotes, which in itself would make him more than a formidable foe to anyone he comes across. As a cosmic entity, Knull has abilities beyond most villains that the heroes have faced in the MCU. Knull's powers also include the manipulation of darkness, which allows him to summon dark tentacles and obscure light. He's also an immensely powerful fighter, with strength akin to Marvel's mightiest heroes like Thor or the Hulk. With his psychic connection to the symbiotes, who exist as a living extension of his will, Knull can also invade the mind of other characters, making him even more dangerous since he can turn friends into enemies, bent to his will.
And God is coming.
As the creator of Venom, Knull ultimately attempts to reclaim his wayward symbiote in a plotline that might parallel Knull's presence in Venom: The Last Dance. In the 2020 crossover event King in Black, Knull made his way toward Earth, where Venom and his symbiotic partner, Eddie Brock, could sense the approaching evil.
He's here. So, it's time to go to work.
Enlisting the Avengers along with several other defenders of Earth, Venom was confronted by Knull, who makes short work of just about everyone he comes across. Knull is not necessarily Marvel's most powerful villain in terms of sheer strength. Still, his ability to manipulate minds through the use of his symbiotes makes him an antagonist for the ages. In King in Black's climax, the heroes are pushed to their very limits, and the consequences lead to one beloved character to be killed outright, at least for a time. Knull's presence is enough to rally the greatest Marvel heroes, each of whom is pushed to the limits of what they can be reasonably expected to withstand. Even characters like Sentry, who will be appearing for the first time on screen in Thunderbolts, are no match for Knull in a one-on-one conflict, so it will be interesting to see how a lone wolf like Venom would fare against Knull without. The question remains, will Venom be able to handle Knull in the upcoming Venom: The Last Dance, or will this reunion with the symbiote's creator bring about Venom's end?
We have something he needs.
Knull's presence in Venom: The Last Dance is a big deal. Knull's addition to the Venomverse and potentially the MCU reflects his rise to prominence in Marvel Comics. His presence establishes a crucial background in the creation of the symbiotes. His inclusion also could tie into the birth of the present universe itself, a backstory that could prove important in the multiverse saga. In Venom: The Last Dance, Knull will still be the embodiment of darkness, incensed by what he believes to be a perversion of the Void. In terms of motivation, motivation in the comics, Knull only wants things to revert to the way they were before the Celestials made forms out of light. His motivation in Venom: The Last Dance will likely remain the same, making him a foe that could extend his reach beyond the confines of Eddie Brock's Earth in the multiverse. As Venom's creator, Knull means that the live-action version of the character will finally come face-to-face with his own history, something that has been suggested since the first film in the trilogy. This confrontation undoubtedly will lead up to a battle that will decide the character's fate.
I'm with you to the end.
Most importantly, Knull is not just a villain of the week. He is a deity from the time before time. Knull craves nothingness and will do whatever it takes to restore what he believes to be the original order before the Celestials made a mess of everything. Let us know your favorite Knull story in the comments below. Remember to hit subscribe before you leave. The Last Dance begins with a sequence set on the planet Clintar, where Knull has been imprisoned by his creations, the Symbiotes. Throughout the movie, Knull sends his minions, the Xenophages, to look for a codex, which is the key to freeing him from his planetary prison. However, despite the looming threat of a Knull invasion, nothing of the sort actually happens. Instead, The Last Dance is sort of like a filler story between larger big bad confrontations. The introduction is the longest scene with Knull on screen, with later appearances limited to commentary on the Earthbound action. For most of The Last Dance, Eddie and Venom do their best to survive long enough to figure out what to do with the Codex, which activates whenever Venom and Eddie become a single entity. Once suited up, the Codex sends a homing frequency that attracts the Xenophages. To make matters worse, the Imperium soldiers, armed with sonic weaponry, are also after the Codex. Scene to scene, Eddie and Venom are knocked around as they try to come up with a solution that will keep Knull from escaping his prison. With a whole introduction dedicated to Knull, his minions swarming around every scene, and the Codex, it would only make sense that eventually Knull would manage to escape his shackles. Sadly, that never happens. What makes this weirder is that Knull never actually appears on Earth. Still, in a post-credit sequence, Knull promises that he will return, showing that Knull is actually being saved for a later date. So why was Knull established and then just as quickly taken off the board? The answer probably has to do with the fact that there were too many threads to wrap up in Venom's arc. For The Last Dance, the finale was meant to be grand, but ends up suggesting more while effectively closing the door, for the time being at least, on the star duo, Eddie and Venom. If Knull should eventually come into play down the line, then he will appear in a world without the most famous symbiote. It's hard to see how he will have much purpose without his foil. Tell us what you think could happen to Knull in the future in the comments below.
Hey, Parker.
Welcome to CBR. The filming of Spider-Man 4 starts in mid-2025. Marvel has yet to announce details on the plot, but fans are already discussing its potential antagonist. Today, let's analyze 3 potential villains for Spider-Man 4. What would their inclusion mean for the franchise? Kingpin. Considering how Spider-Man No Way Home ended, and with Kingpin set to appear in Daredevil, Born Again, fans want to see Spider-Man fight Kingpin too. Kingpin is a crime lord who could fit seamlessly into Peter Parker's new life, now that he may temporarily stay away from multiversal adventures. This option would bring a grounded tone. Vincent D'Onofrio is cast as Wilson Fisk, or Kingpin, in Daredevil Born Again. The actor will have finished his obligations to the series once the shooting of Spider-Man 4 begins, so it could all align. Spider-Man 4 could focus solely on Peter dealing with the criminal underworld, a defining trait of the friendly neighborhood hero that hasn't been explored much in the MCU yet. Scorpion. Having Kingpin in Spider-Man 4 wouldn't exclude the possibility of other villains appearing as well, especially because Kingpin is often manipulating events from behind the scenes. One villain in particular, Scorpion, was already teased in the post-credits scene of Spider-Man: Homecoming, when Matt Gargan says he is looking for Spider-Man. However, the franchise never went back to the idea. Matt Gargan could return now, and Spider-Man 4 could create a connection between Kingpin and the experiment that transforms him into Scorpion in the comics, making Kingpin the one who had the experiment idea instead of J. Jonah Jameson, for example. Kingpin would want to outsource the Spider-Man problem at first so he can focus on his criminal empire. After being humiliated by Spider-Man and left in prison, Matt Gargan would be approached by Kingpin, who promises to break him out and help him get revenge. Grounded fight scenes between Spider-Man and Scorpion would be a fantastic treat for fans. This antagonism would force Peter to reflect on his past actions as Spider-Man, potentially regretting some of his past decisions, including isolating himself. Knull. Knull is an ambitious option, but bringing the cosmic villain into the mix seems logical if Sony and Marvel are trying to get Venom into the MCU. Knull, the god of the symbiotes, could be introduced as part of a symbiote storyline, possibly tying into the events of Venom: The Last Dance. His arrival could be connected to the symbiote that briefly appeared in No Way Home. It could involve Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock and Venom teaming up with Spider-Man to fight Knull, or introduce the Black Suit Spider-Man to the MCU. This option would keep Spider-Man in cosmic territory, following the MCU's trend for Peter Parker. Who do you think is the best villain for Spider-Man 4? Let us know in the comments. Until next time,
I'm with you to the end.
welcome to CBR. Since Knull's brief appearance in Venom: The Last Dance and rumors that he might be in Spider-Man 4, fans can't help but wonder how the MCU would develop such a powerful villain. Today we are analyzing the possibility of the MCU adapting the King in Black event from Marvel Comics.
Knull abandoned the Clintar and left me alone.
There are several different theories on how the MCU can include Knull after using the Necro Sword in Thor: Love and Thunder, and also in the post-credits scene of the Eternals. There is also debate about whether Knull can even die or not. As a primordial being from the void that was all that existed until the Celestials created the multiverse, Knull is wrongfully seen as immortal. However, Knull has two major defeats in the comics, and there is definitely enough material for the MCU to adapt from and kill Knull, permanently or not. That is possible according to Death of the Venomverse number 5, published in 2023, for example. In that issue, a multiversal Carnage kills Knull and becomes the King in Black. A popular theory circulating now is that Knull had a variant in Earth 616 who died. Him dying off screen in the MCU's main timeline would explain why there are no symbiotes on Earth 616, but there is an All Black. He could have been killed by the Celestials after creating the Necro Sword, before creating the symbiotes. At the same time, there's also the possibility Knull never existed solely in the 616 universe, but he can travel through universes. That explains how symbiotes scattered across multiple universes, but are not present in every single universe. There is no clear answer to the variance question in the comics, but considering Knull a primordial being with no variance would still allow for a future King in Black adaptation. The King in Black event is the second example that debunks the theory that Knull can't die.
But his real name was Knull.
In King in Black number 5, published in 2021, Knull dies, and Eddie Brock becomes the new King in Black. If there was no Knull variant in 616, the existence of the Necro Sword, but not of any other symbiote in the MCU so far, can be explained by Knull passing through 616 in the past and leaving the Necro Sword behind, or it being stolen from him and taken there afterwards. For today's plot theory for a future crossover in the MCU, where Knull is the antagonist, what's important to consider is that the Knull in Venom: The Last Dance would be the one to return. In this theory, Knull would have been introduced in the Venom trilogy to be later developed in the MCU. Here's how he would die by the end of King in Black.
The King in Black, Lord of the Abyss.
Knull ends Venom: The Last Dance by referring to himself as the King in Black and threatening to return, which is an indication Marvel and Sony want to adapt the event from the comics in some way. And there are also some other indications, like introducing the Sentry into the MCU with Thunderbolts. What if Marvel is planning to slowly build up a major crossover between Sony, Fox, and MCU characters in a King in Black event? This could happen after the multiverse saga ends, with the essential characters being introduced from now until then. Spider-Man 4 can either introduce the Eddie Brock from Earth 616, or make Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock travel over to the MCU timeline once again to finally meet Tom Holland's Peter Parker.
That guy.
The fourth Spider-Man movie, led by Tom Holland, would be the first to include symbiotes. Knull could send Venom to 616 after Eddie to reactivate the codex he wanted in Venom: The Last Dance, but ultimately couldn't get because Venom detached from Eddie before the xenophages could deliver them. Or the piece of Venom that stayed behind in 616 when Venom and Eddie traveled spontaneously through the multiverse, which has yet to be explained, could find its way to Eddie and be a connection to Venom's conscience, attracting Knull. The multiversal traveling could stem from Knull trying to teleport them to him but failing, as he's still weakened. So Eddie could once again spontaneously teleport to 616. But with Tom Hardy himself referring to the third Venom movie as his last, it's more likely that Venom would bond with someone else, who is already in the MCU. Spider-Man 4 would be the perfect moment to introduce a MCU Eddie Brock and his son, Dylan. Within this multi-film plot theory for the franchise, Spider-Man 4 would not include Knull at all. There would be another villain, and, in parallel, it would serve to introduce the MCU version of Eddie Brock and symbiotes to that universe. Other Spider-Man movies after that, and X-Men or Avengers movies, or even a movie titled King in Black, could continue the story. In the King in Black comics, Knull's release from Clintar is the result of various events triggered on Earth. Cultists who worship Knull revive Cletus Cassidy and connect him to fragments of the original symbiote dragon. Carnage collects enough fragments of Knull's essence to weaken the bonds of Clintar. This gradual accumulation of power allows Knull to take back control of the symbiotes little by little, freeing himself and conquering planets.
Who sent that thing?
My creator.
The event in the comics begins with Knull invading Earth with symbiote dragons and symbiote-controlled Celestials. All heroes of Earth unite against this major threat, including the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. Knull uses his symbiotes to take control of most heroes fighting him and even kills the Sentry in issue number 1, who's one of the most powerful Marvel heroes. Knull rips Bob in two and assimilates the Void, the dark counterpart to the Sentry. Knull then covers the entire Earth with a massive symbiote. He reveals his goal to capture Eddie Brock's son, Dylan, due to Dylan's unique ability to control and destroy symbiotes. After absorbing Venom, Knull kills Eddie. Dylan, Thor, the Silver Surfer, and the other few remaining heroes carry on the fight against Knull. The Enigma Force, also known as the God of Light, revives Eddie, choosing him as the new Captain Universe. Empowered by the Unipower, Eddie wields Thor's hammer and Silver Surfer's board, combining them into his own cosmic weapon. In a climactic battle, Eddie hurls Knull into the sun, vaporizing him with his new power. When the Enigma Force departs, Eddie is revealed to be the new King in Black, while Dylan takes up his father's mantle as the new Venom. With so many building blocks in place or coming, like a new Fantastic Four, the Sentry and Thunderbolts, Marvel acquiring the rights to the X-Men characters, and the possibility of a new Avengers lineup with so many new heroes to be introduced from 2025 to 2027, it would be completely possible to have a major King in Black crossover sometime from 2028. While Sony can carry on the Venom movies with Venom bonding with another character, like Flash Thompson, the Spider-Man movies can finally have an Eddie Brock who's part of the MCU and bonds with a Venom duplicate born from that piece of Venom left behind in 616.
I will return to the void of existence.
Knull is not dead, but he will need to be killed to be stopped once he eventually arrives on Earth. Although the cosmic supervillain was introduced in Venom: The Last Dance, fans argue he's too great of a threat to simply be defeated by Peter Parker in Spider-Man 4. Knull is stronger than Spider-Man and all other heroes on Earth combined. He also has a complicated comics lore, and Venom: The Last Dance only scratched the surface when it comes to his backstory and power. The Spider-Man movies have been long known to be a battlefield of interest between Marvel and Sony, and with conflicting reports on what the Disney-Sony deal entails specifically over the years, it's impossible to know how the studios will continue to develop the parallel franchises. Fans have been asking for a better integration between the MCU and the SSU, but that could already be silently in the works within the multiverse saga, with all the new characters and concepts it has and will still introduce. Knull being simply teased in Venom: The Last Dance could be a part of a bigger strategy of integration, in which Knull will travel to 616 in the future, where the King in Black event will take place. The Knull of 616 either doesn't exist at all, and there is only one Knull in the multiverse, or he is already dead. The Knull we have already seen in Venom: The Last Dance would die at the hands of the 616 Eddie Brock in a fight involving all of Earth's heroes, including Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and the Avengers. Would you like to see a movie adaptation of King in Black? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, thanks for watching CBR.